Hey, role-playing games are the perfect catalyst for personal growth. As a teenager, I spent hundreds if not thousands of hours immersing myself in these fictional people, trying to figure out what had made them who they are and how they could become better. What I didn't know back then is that by immersing myself in these fictional worlds, I would learn how to shape my own world into what I wanted it to be. And the first thing that really helped me in this is to always check my map, which means that in life you should always know where you are and where you're heading. And you get to know this by regularly reflecting on your thoughts and actions, and the journaling practice is really helpful for this. So take the time at the end of your day to ask yourself, what did I do today that I'm proud of? Where did I fall short? And what do I want to achieve tomorrow? Similarly, you figure out where you're heading by taking an honest look at your dreams and evaluating whether the actions you're taking towards them are productive or existent at all. Because it's easy to dream of someday, but we know that if we're not taking the actions towards what we want to achieve, then that someday will likely never come. And what's truly important is to make this a habit. It doesn't matter whether you're doing this weekly, monthly, or yearly. What matters is making sure that the demands of regular life don't constantly take precedence over your dream. Because there's always something urgent to do, but is it important? Is it bringing you closer to where you want to be? And you better make sure to answer this question often, because otherwise, like an unlucky adventurer in the forest, you'll quickly lose your path. Therefore, the second life lesson to learn from RPGs is that you should always explore the area you're in. I mean, is it just me, or have years of playing RPGs also conditioned you to want to explore every drawer you see? And no, I'm not advising you to steal from your friends, I'm not Skyrim. The area in this case is a metaphor for where you are on your life path. It's easy to get stuck in life. Once we have a steady job, a nice enough apartment, okay relationships, we feel like we don't really have to try anymore. Because everything is okay, right? So why rock the boat? Because in order to know whether something is actually okay, you have to figure out what's out there. You can't really judge something by itself. You have to put it into the larger context of life. A silly example. For the last 8 years, I lived in the same one-bedroom apartment. This was my first apartment, so I didn't really have any requirements for it, aside from it not being my mom's place. And this wasn't a shabby hole, but as I got out into the world and saw how other people lived, I quickly realized how my apartment didn't quite measure up to where I wanted to be. And that's because my frame of reference changed. Often, we know deep down that we're not happy with where and who we are. Yet, we have limiting beliefs that tell us that change is too difficult or impossible. And so we shut our eyes to other options out there because seeing them hurts too much. It reminds us of what we think we can't have. Which brings me to my next point, because the third lesson to learn is that in order to level up, you have to take on challenges. We shy away from the unknown. Instead of choosing the difficult path we know will lead to more growth, we prefer to stay in our comfort zone. Leaving it can feel difficult, no matter how much we know we should. So what is it that is so comforting about that place? It's that here we can guard our precious ego. Here we can stick to things we've grown skilled at, instead of risking looking like a fool at trying something new. But stagnancy is dangerous. Because yes, we might feel more confident now, excelling at what we've always done, but how will we feel in 10 years? Thinking about who we could have been. To develop, meaning to level up, we need to take on new challenges. And instead of waiting for life to throw us curveballs that force us to grow, we can be proactive. If we're truly the main character of our life, then that means we're not sitting around waiting for opportunity, but we go out and find it. And so we choose the more difficult path. Yes, it requires us to take risks, but it promises much more development than the safe, stifling path ever could. This can look like anything. Taking on a work project you don't feel entirely qualified for, or learning to dance when your entire life you've had 2 left feet. Don't trap yourself into thinking that your current self-concept is the entire truth about you. Because the fourth important lesson is that you can always reinvent yourself. The most fun part about RPGs to me is that I get to make a new character all the time. Within the span of a few minutes, I can become someone completely different. And while in life we don't get the luxury of a completely fresh start, we can always discover new versions of ourselves. For example, I had always considered myself to be purely a writer. But when the pandemic had me stuck at home, I decided to teach myself how to draw. And I went from someone with no ability at all to at least basic ability. And while I'm no Da Vinci by any means, I've certainly come a long way. But the most important part about teaching myself how to draw was not actually learning how to draw, but learning that I could acquire skills I had never thought myself capable of before. It made me realize that just because I had gotten used to thinking of myself in a certain way, it didn't mean that I had to stay with that version of myself. We can always learn new skills, pursue new interests, or choose different priorities. Similarly, we can always create new relationships or find new beginnings in established ones. And it's the relationships in our lives that benefit the most from us learning the fifth lesson, which is that you should always go out of your way to help others. I mean, anyone who's ever played an open world RPG like Skyrim knows there are a lot of quests to do. And I mean a lot. And most of the time, these quests begin by you walking down the street, minding your own business, and a random NPC mobbing you, asking you to pick some herbs, find a lost dog, or dispose of the local vampire lord. And while your life might not be exactly comparable, I mean, who has the time to handpick herbs, there are still likely people around you who could use your help. Maybe you're a skilled craftsperson and your brother has been struggling to fix his broken closet door for a week. Or you're a gardening genius and see your neighbor despair over their withering tomatoes. Either way, we often get so caught up in our tasks that we forget what truly matters in life, which is relationships. But it's exactly in those moments that we show who we truly are. Because showing up for other people, even when it's inconvenient for us, is a mark of character. But if you've ever struggled with this, don't judge yourself. Researchers Daly and Batson explored this phenomenon in their famous Good Samaritan study. In this study, they asked several seminary students to teach on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And on their way to complete their task, many of these students failed to help a shabbily dressed man on the street, placed there by the researchers. Researchers concluded that, regardless of religious or ethical beliefs, it was the degree to which someone was in a hurry that determined whether they stopped to help the man or not. And if that degree was very high, then the students quite literally stepped over the chance to be a good Samaritan in order to preach on the need to be a good Samaritan. So see, we are all susceptible to feeling that the next thing in our calendar is more important than the person right in front of us. But if the irony of that study isn't enough to make you rethink your own behavior, then consider this self-serving reason for helping other people, because they are likely to reward you in unsuspecting ways. This doesn't necessarily mean paying you, though we would do good in paying people more often. But it can look like doing you a favor in the future, introducing you to someone from their network, or simply providing you with the energy of their gratitude. But prioritizing relationships over our blind need for achievement can activate our fear of missing out. Because if we stop to help just any stranger on the street, won't that increase our risk of not getting everything done? Yes. And that's not a bad thing, because the sixth lesson is that there's always more things to get done. Every day we get bombarded with new books to read, podcasts to listen to, people to meet. And so we fill our days up with activities we don't care about, hoping that if only we get to the end of our always growing to-do list, we'll finally feel accomplished. But we are wrong, because getting everything done is an illusion. Instead, we should focus on getting done the things that matter. We tell ourselves that someday we'll do that thing we know we should be doing more often, like working out, reading, or going on a date. Someday when we're less busy. The issue is that day never comes, because we wait around watching days turn to weeks, turn to years. We should be proactive in making that time. Because if something is important to us, we can't just sit around and wait for spare time to show up in our calendar. Because life has a way of always filling up our spare time with meaningless things to do. By being proactive and making time for the things that matter to us, especially when we're busy, we stop being dependent on outer circumstances. We take control of our lives and embrace our power in becoming who we're meant to be. And sometimes that thing we need to do the most is not doing anything at all. Because the seventh important life lesson I learned from playing RPGs is that it's okay to sit down and relax. Just like I'm an advocate for taking on the more difficult yet more rewarding path, I'm also an advocate for making that path as enjoyable as possible. I won't bore you with the many benefits of breaks. Just like the benefits of good nutrition and working out, we all know what we should be doing. The issue is often overcoming our resistance to doing it. The inability to allow yourself to relax is a self-worth issue. Because what you're saying is, I'm not worth spending time on myself. I'm not worth being taken care of. I'm not worthy when I'm not producing something. And just like we can lose sight of our relationships to others when we're busy chasing our goals, we can lose sight of our relationship to ourselves. And the relationship to ourselves is actually the most important relationship in our lives. So while making sure you know where you are, where you're heading, leveling up, allowing yourself to reinvent yourself, helping others, and recognizing that there's always more to do, make sure you take the time to sit back and relax. But if you're experiencing setbacks while doing so, then make sure to check out my last video, where I give you 6 practical steps to overcoming setbacks. My name is Zhenya. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you in the next one.